Right now, the rivers beneath Columbus, Indiana, are rising again. All of them, at the same time, toward the same city, with nowhere left to go. Why is one of America's most flood-engineered cities drowning again? Why are rivers that crested near all-time records less than a year ago already surging toward major flood stage? And why are forecasters saying the worst part may not even have started yet? But this was only the first warning. It begins, as it always does here, with the sky turning the color of iron. A wall of thunderstorms rolls across central Indiana, dragging curtains of rain so heavy that visibility drops to zero on the interstates. The air smells of wet asphalt and something older, the mineral tang of saturated earth giving up its last reserves. Within hours, roads across Bartholomew County vanish beneath spreading sheets of brown water. State Road 11 in Columbus disappears under a rising tide of floodwater. State Road 46, the main artery connecting the city to the outside world, faces closures as water claims the low-lying stretches. Police cruisers park sideways across on-ramps, their lights painting red and blue streaks across standing water. The flood reaches as far as headlights can see. Emergency crews are already deploying boats. Firefighters from the Columbus Fire Department launch flat-bottomed rescue craft into streets that were dry 12 hours ago. Overhead, thermal imaging drones scan the flooded creek banks for body heat. They sweep through trees and debris, searching for anyone the water has trapped. What came next shocked even the scientists. They find them along Water Street, a camp of people sheltering near the creek banks, now surrounded by water that rose faster than anyone predicted. 12 people and 4 pets are pulled from the rising flood by boat. Sheriff's deputies recover more stranded residents downstream. No one has died yet, but the water is still climbing. The National Weather Service has just issued an upgraded warning. This is no longer minor flooding, this is major, and it is heading straight for the hospital. Columbus Regional Hospital sits at the heart of this city of roughly 50,000 people. It is the only hospital serving all of Bartholomew County and a 10-county surrounding region. More than 1,600 employees work inside its walls, alongside over 200 physicians. For residents across this 10-county region, there is no plan B. But this hospital carries a scar that runs deeper than most people know.
On June 7, 2008, a small tributary called Haw Creek burst its banks after heavy rainfall. As much as 11 inches in some areas fell upstream over a 12-hour period. The water moved through the center of Columbus like a wall, pouring into the hospital's basement with terrifying speed. The basement filled within 35 minutes. By the time it was over 13 feet of water, roughly 130 million gallons had poured in, rising 6 inches onto the first floor. The emergency department closed. Primary and backup electrical systems failed simultaneously. Staff scrambled through stairwells carrying patients by hand. Indiana National Guard soldiers helped move the critically ill down flights of stairs to waiting vehicles. Among the last to be evacuated were 2 newborns in incubators from the special care nursery. 157 patients were pulled from the building that night. The hospital shut its doors for the first and only time in its more than 90-year history. It would remain closed for nearly 5 months, with damage exceeding $180 million. And the signs were already spreading. That flood did not just damage a building, it damaged a city's sense of safety. More than 1,500 homes flooded across Columbus alone. Across Bartholomew County, roughly 2,800 structures sustained damage and 3 people lost their lives. Entire neighborhoods along Haw Creek were erased. Homes bought out, demolished, returned to open land. Geese now wander through what were once backyards. Columbus swore it would never happen again. In the years that followed, FEMA approved and partially funded a $4.7 million flood defense system for the hospital. A 2,400-foot flood wall was constructed around the entire campus, built 2 feet higher than the calculated 100-year flood elevation. 15 passive floodgates were installed at every entry point, gates engineered to lie dormant underground until floodwater reaches them. They rise automatically using nothing but hydrostatic pressure, requiring no electricity and no human intervention. The system was completed in April 2012. It was designed to be the last line of defense against the unthinkable. But the ground had one more secret. Understanding why Columbus floods requires understanding what lies beneath it. The city sits at one of the most dangerous hydrological intersections in the American Midwest. The Driftwood River, the Flat Rock River, Clifty Creek, and Haw Creek all converge here. They merge within the city limits to form the East Fork of the White River.
Approximately 2,000 square miles of upstream land drains directly through Columbus and Bartholomew County. There are no flood control reservoirs upstream, no dams to slow the surge. When rain falls heavily across central Indiana, all of that water funnels toward a single point. That point is Columbus. Urban development over decades has reduced the river system's natural capacity. Buildings, roads, and parking lots replaced soil and vegetation that once absorbed rainfall. The floodplain has been compressed. The river's margin for error has been erased. 1/3 of the city of Columbus sits within the floodplain, not near it, within it. No one expected what happened next. In April 2025, the same river system produced some of the highest water levels in living memory. 7.5 inches of rain fell on Bartholomew County in just 36 hours. Communities north of the county received similar volumes simultaneously. All of that water rushed south toward Columbus. The East Fork White River at Seymour surged to a gauge height of nearly 20 feet, approaching the all-time record of 21 feet set during the catastrophic flood of 1913. The gap between the present and history was narrowing to inches. State Road 46 shut down. State Road 11 went underwater. The land between major roadways turned into a continuous inland sea. First responders completed 15 water rescues, and officials declared it the largest flood in Bartholomew County in 17 years. But this time, the hospital's flood wall held. The hospital's flood defenses were activated. 2 flood wall sections were raised as a precaution, and the barrier held. The hospital stayed open, emergency department running, patients in their beds, no evacuation. The system, tested for the first time under real flood conditions, performed as designed. The community exhaled. The investment had paid off. That relief lasted less than 11 months. In early March 2026, another storm system swept across central Indiana. Between 3 and 5 inches of rain fell in the first wave alone, on ground still saturated from an unusually wet late winter.
Doppler radar showed repeated storm cells forming over the same counties. The soil had no capacity left to absorb a single additional drop. By Wednesday morning, Clifty Creek was flooding at Hartsville. By Thursday, the Flat Rock River and the Driftwood River were both accelerating toward moderate flood stage. The East Fork White River at Columbus climbed past 12 feet, then 13. Forecasters projected a crest above 15 feet, flood stage is 9 feet. And then the rescues started again. At least a dozen roads across the county were closed. Millrace Park, Noblet Park, and McCullough's Rung Park vanished under brown water. The fog that settled over the county on Friday morning gave the flooded landscape the look of something ancient and drowned, a ghost city half submerged in silence. A father and 2 young children were trapped in their SUV on Tellman Road, just north of the Flat Rock River. Floodwater from the Driftwood River had submerged the vehicle. Members of the Columbus Police, Columbus Fire Department, Columbus Township Fire and Rescue, and Bartholomew County Water Rescue Team converged on the scene. The family was pulled from the vehicle as floodwater continued to rise around them. The brown water smelled of diesel and rotting vegetation. The current tugged at the legs of every responder who waded in, and the road beneath their boots was invisible. What the 2008 flood felt like from the inside is something survivors have never forgotten. "You just feel violated," one Columbus resident recalled after that disaster, and now, nearly 2 decades later, the feeling was returning. Police began issuing citations to drivers who ignored barricades. At least one driver had already been fined after getting stranded in floodwaters. Emergency officials pleaded with the public to stop treating floodwater as an inconvenience. It is a death trap, and the rescues were consuming resources the county could not afford to waste. What scientists discovered next changed everything. The National Weather Service extended flood warnings across the entire region. The Driftwood River was forecast to crest at over 15 feet, well above its 11-foot flood stage. The East Fork White River at Columbus was expected to crest near 14 feet. Downstream at Seymour, the river was climbing again, and while forecasters did not expect it to match the near-record levels of 2025, the trajectory was alarming. Flood warnings extended far downstream along the White River system. Bartholomew, Decatur, Johnson, Shelby, Rush, Brown, Jackson, and a dozen more counties were under alert. Some forecasters warned that if additional rainfall materialized, river levels could continue climbing toward levels not seen since the previous spring. Whether they would approach the all-time marks, records that in some cases have stood since 1913, remained uncertain. But the crisis was not finished. Another weather system was approaching from the west. A cold front was expected to bring additional thunderstorms with heavy rainfall across the Ohio Valley. The ground could absorb nothing more. Every inch of rain would become runoff, and every drop would reach the rivers. The rivers had nowhere left to go but up and out, into streets, into homes, into the places people believed were safe. The mathematics of this crisis are quietly terrifying. Emergency managers acknowledged that while this event appeared less severe than April 2025, the rivers were still reaching historically significant marks, with more storms in the forecast. What concerned them was not whether this single flood would break records, it was the pattern.
The question was no longer whether the system could handle a 100-year flood. Based on what had happened in the past 2 years, the real question was what happens when major floods begin arriving every 12 months. Columbus has invested millions in flood protection since 2008. The hospital flood wall, the flood response and evacuation plan team, improved monitoring, upgraded radar coverage. The city won a statewide award for excellence in floodplain management. And yet here they were again. Boats in the streets, families pulled from sinking vehicles, roads erased, parks drowned. The same rivers, the same neighborhoods, the same desperate calculus of water versus time. But none of this explains the real danger. The hospital flood wall is designed to withstand a 100-year flood without power or human intervention. It is currently holding, sections deployed as needed, the water pressing against engineered concrete. But the river is still climbing, and another storm system is approaching. The wall was built 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. That margin was calculated using historical data, and this is worth considering, data that assumed the rainfall patterns of the 20th century would continue into the 21st. If that assumption no longer holds, the margin of safety could be narrower than anyone intended. The rivers do not care about engineering tolerances or statistical probabilities. What the data could imply is unsettling. The flood of 2008 was supposed to be the outlier, the once-in-a-generation catastrophe. The defenses built afterward were designed to ensure it could never happen again. But April 2025 brought water levels that rivaled 2008, and now, March 2026, less than 12 months later, the rivers are flooding again, this time at moderate to major levels. 3 significant flood events in fewer than 2 years, on a river system whose all-time records date back more than a century. We can assume, based on that trajectory, that the trend is accelerating. Hydrologists have a term for this kind of pattern, non-stationarity. It means historical flood frequency data can no longer be trusted to predict the future. When the climate shifts, the old models break. What was once a 100-year flood could become a 10-year event, and based on what Columbus has experienced, that shift may already be underway. Some scientists argue this is not yet evidence of a permanent shift, that natural variability can produce clusters of extreme events without indicating a long-term trend. Others point to the increasing frequency of heavy precipitation events across the Midwest, documented by NOAA and the National Climate Assessment, and argue the trend is already here. The disagreement is real, and it is unresolved. What is not in dispute is this: Columbus, Indiana, with 1/3 of its land inside a floodplain, no upstream reservoirs, and every major waterway in the region converging within its borders, is being hit by catastrophic flooding at a pace its infrastructure was never designed to withstand. The flood wall around the hospital is holding, for now. The river is still rising, the next storm is hours away, and the question that no engineer, no hydrologist, no emergency manager in Bartholomew County can answer is the one that matters most. What happens when the water finally rises above what anyone ever planned for? If this changes the way you think about flood risk in America, share this with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe for the next update, because the rivers are not done yet.